All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. This webinar is titled Bringing STEM to Your School. My name is Ryan Steuer, founder and executive director of Magnify Learning. But first, we need to talk about dragons, because dragons have an important part to play in education. Not really, but it's the metaphor that I use. So there's this dragon, large, fierce, fire-breathing dragon that is attacking the land of education, and we need to do something about it. So we have this castle that represents the land of education, and there is a dragon coming after it. And luckily for us, we have three brave knights that are willing to go out and fight this dragon to save the land of education. And the first knight will bravely and courageously run out of the castle, filled with passion, a sword and a shield, and will promptly get eaten by the dragon. Now, the second knight is going to do something different. The second knight is going to read every book there is on knighthood, on being a knight, what should you do, what should you not do. Also going to read up on everything there is to know about dragons, know about the problem, know about the solutions, and then is going to passionately and courageously run out of the castle to go defeat the dragon and be promptly eaten. The third knight, however, has a different approach altogether. Still going to use that book and read about dragons and read about what it means to be a knight, but also has a mentor, has a sage that comes alongside to help him interpret what he's been reading and then apply what he's been reading to these other fierce beasts, like this crocodile, for instance. So he's going to go and fight this crocodile and defeat that crocodile. And after that, he's going to stop, reflect, go back to his mentor, and debrief what worked and what could possibly work when he goes to fight the lion. So he takes those same skills, he's honed them, and goes and defeats the lion. He comes back, reads up on bears and dragons, and debriefs with this sage that's helping him to figure out the skills that have worked well, what he needs to repolish, and then he goes, defeats the bear. So now that he's defeated these other fierce animals, he's reflected with his mentor, he's well read and well versed. He now goes outside of the castle and defeats the dragon and saves the land of education. And all the people go, "Wee-hoo, we're saved." And the question is, which one of the knights is your student? What position are we putting them in? Are they filled with passion? We've got them psyched up and ready to go out, but they don't have the skills that they need or the content knowledge they need to go out and be successful. When they leave this castle, they're leaving us and heading out into the world. Are they like the second knight, where they've learned all the content? They've mastered those things. They feel good about that, and they head out only to be eaten by the dragon of life because they don't have the skills they need to be successful? Or have they fought these mini battles with us by solving real world problems while learning the content? So when they head out of the castle, when they head out of our K-12 education to their next journey, that they're equipped with the skills and the content to go and be successful in their next adventure. We want to hope that we're raising that third knight. And if you're an administrator, you might ask yourself, where are your teachers at in this story? Are they just feeding that second knight, content information? Or are they a mentor, a sage that's helping them discern what skills they need to be successful? We need to put our teachers in that position as well, so they can well position our knights that are heading out into the world. So before I started doing dragon metaphors around education, I worked here at UPS. I was an industrial engineer. So as we talk about STEM, I have some background knowledge there. My job was to figure out how to get these 1.5 million packages every day to go where they're supposed to go, and do that with technology, do that with people, bring those two things together. How do we figure those things out? An awful lot of people skills, an awful lot of problem solving skills, a lot of math via spreadsheets and databases, and testing and retesting until we found things that worked, and worked for real, not just theoretical. They may have worked theoretically in the formulas, but then it had to go down to an actual person that moved a package, and it had to work. And I love all things STEM. I jumped ship from UPS and went to an 8th grade English classroom on the southwest side of Indianapolis. I was in a school that was 85% free reduced lunch. And we had learners that, were 10 minutes outside of Indianapolis proper, but had never actually been what we would call downtown. So here we are, and now suddenly they're Skyping with somebody who's in India. Like something happens, like your world is expanded when you're suddenly Skyping with someone who's halfway around the globe. Or when you realize that somebody else is taking time out of their day somewhere else in the world to invest in you, your learners start to change. We did some active protocols with them to make the learning active, to move from passive to active, from apathetic to engaged. We did that with authentic learning and real world problem solving. And fantastic experiences that are just life changers that end up on your mental calendar and your timeline. So here in the bottom left of your screen is the grand opening of the largest solar farm in North America. It's on the west side of Indianapolis, on the airport property. And you have here in the center, you have the president of Duke Energy, the president of Indianapolis Power and Light. And in the middle, in the red shirt, is a young man named Richard Tran. And Richard was a young guy. His family, he was the second generation here in America. And his dad owned an egg roll king there locally. So he was a local community partner that loved and gave back to the school. And those three gentlemen right there, President, and Richard, they all gave a speech, and one of them got a standing ovation. That's right, it was Richard. It wouldn't be a good story if it wasn't. Richard was more prepared, more passionate about the subject, and he also was offered box seats to a Pacers game and a real internship as a 14-year-old. That's exciting stuff. Now, he probably used that ceremonial shovel in his backyard, but that's not the point. He was on the real stage with real executives doing real work. And that's exciting things. So that's how we start to make learning come alive. When we talk about project-based learning and STEM, these are the experiences that we're trying to give our learners so that they start to become lifelong learners and they start to understand the process and the mindset. And we'll get into that. Here are a few options here with Magnify Learning. We have a podcast called the PBL Playbook. You can check that out wherever it is you engage in of your other podcasts. It's run by 2 PBL facilitators, and they interview other PBL facilitators. So it's really boots on the ground, right there on the shelf, talking about PBL and the work that they love. I do a PBL Simplified YouTube series that are really fun to do. We break down one concept a week, 3 to 5 minutes videos. They go right into your inbox, and you can see those, or you can subscribe to the channel. And I also wrote this book, Project-Based Learning, Wins, Fails, and Where to Start. Just really fun. But our topic for today is how can we bring STEM to our schools and sustain that movement? Because we don't just want random acts of STEM. So what we'll do today is we're going to do an overview of STEM, talk about stakeholder alignment. Who do we need to bring into this process? Random acts of STEM versus a STEM mindset, and then resources for you to take home and to share with others. So hopefully you leave with a plan and a bunch of resources so you can start the STEM conversation. So I'd like you to, in the chat, if you would, is just put why STEM and why now? Why for you? So here are just 5 reasons why you might want to jump into STEM, right? We know that we want our learners to go into STEM careers. So that could be your reason. You want to broaden the horizons of your learners. Maybe you as a school district realize, hey, school choice, I need to stand out among the other schools here. Like, so it's parents want to send their kids here. Or maybe you need a tangible goal for your teachers to change some of the culture. Maybe you're rooted in this traditional teaching and can't get out of it. Like, let's use STEM as maybe that flag for us to move towards. Maybe you're already doing this work and you just want to add some more recognition to it. So you want to make it more public. You want to bring in community partners. Great idea. You should do that. Maybe you realize you want to shift the power from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom, because that takes us from passive to active. All right, great. Love that piece in the chat. Just put your numbers in there. Obviously, it's likely more than one of those, so just put multiple numbers. Good, right? 1 in 5, 100%. Good. So you always want to start with the why, right? So I want you to live your why, like that's my motto. And so get your teachers in a spot where they're excited about what we're doing. And we'll get into that actually in the next slide as we talk about stakeholders. But when we start looking at STEM mindset and some of the things we're getting learners to do, it's really why we got into education. We didn't get into education to just go from page 1 to page 2 to page 3 through a textbook. That's not why we're here. We're here to reach out to learners and create relationships and show our learners opportunities they might not see otherwise, or see those light bulb moments, right? Just go off. Like that's what teachers tell me all the time. That's why they're in the classroom. And sometimes we lose that. Sometimes we get in the day-to-day and we forget why we're here. So as you bring STEM to your school, it's an opportunity to bring us back to our why and get us excited and passionate about the work. And the other piece as far as stakeholders, because we're jumping right in here to stakeholder alignment, is your teachers need to be on board for this. So if STEM is a new thing, we need to bring them in. We'll talk about some ways to do that, but you want to get them on board and moving in your same direction and wanting to go towards STEM, seeing the reasons of why we want our learners to be involved in STEM, the opportunities that are there, right? So you're going to have to talk to a language arts teacher that's been teaching the same way for 20 years and be able to explain why STEM is a good idea. And that he or she doesn't have to throw out everything she's ever done in order to bring STEM into his or her classroom, because you don't. So we need to have those conversations and make sure that as we go through the change process, that we're bringing people along with us and we're not going out on our own. Some other partner alignments or stakeholder alignments. Community partners are a key portion to STEM learning. You want to be able to bring STEM into the classroom, and we want to be able to go out and solve real world problems. So from the very beginning, if you're just starting to think, hey, I think we should move towards STEM, or if you've launched it, it hasn't gone as quickly as you thought, bring in the community partners. Okay, bring in businesses. If you ask businesses what they want from our learners when they graduate, right? Like when they leave that castle, what should they be able to do? They need to be able to problem solve. They need to be able to work with others. They need to be able to be responsible for their own actions and show up on time. They need to be able to collaborate, present, speak well, like all of these things. They never say compound complex sentences. They never say slope intercept form, right? And those are our standards, and the standards in our curriculum, those are vehicles to take us to the skills and problem solving for our learners. So as you bring in business partners, they'll start to push some of those things. Nonprofits can be great partners to come in and help out with different units, projects, presentations, all sorts of different things, but they're also a voice out in the community. So bring them in really early in the planning process. School board, obviously a key stakeholder. They can be in the way or they can be really supportive. So bring them on early, show them the vision of where STEM can take you. Start to show them that you can have local businesses in the classroom helping to guide our learners in a really positive direction. Parents, I put them on this list, and I had them on a separate list, but I put them on this one because they're likely in those businesses, the nonprofits, and on the school board. But you also have parents that aren't in those spaces, and parents need to see the why for shifting the learning. And parents will be on board right away if we can explain this well. And I'll give you a tangible way to do that here in the next slide. Another way is at Magnify Learning. If you go to our resources page, we have a what is PBL page, and it just goes through and gives some verbiage, some images, some videos that explain why PBL and why now. Those are important things to explain to our parents because they're used to education looking very traditional, as like what they went through, but the world's changed. The skills that our kids need are different. And you can, again, just ask our business partners, our nonprofits. But if you also ask any parent, like, do you want your child to be able to think more critically or solve more problems, or not just get points, but be able to apply those things, to be able to speak in public? Every parent's going to raise their hand and say, yes, I want that for my child. But we need to be able to explain that clearly so that they understand where we're going and why we're going there. So one way to do that, another way to get stakeholders on board, is to create an ideal graduate profile. And we can help you do this. We've got some tools to help run you through an ideal graduate protocol, and we'll link those to this webinar. But if you look here, this one's from Shelby County, Kentucky, and they do a fantastic job of this. So this is in all of their schools. Everybody knows this. Everyone in the district knows that these are the things that they want their learners to leave high school with. They want them to be able to communicate well. They want them to be a lifelong learner, responsible collaborator, critical thinker, all those pieces. And then there's bullet points that spell out what that means. And when you do that, and when that's the goal, it suddenly has to change the things that you've done in the classroom your whole life. Just going through the textbook point by point is not going to get you to that ideal graduate. Just won't happen. So you have to be able to adapt and give the learners some power, some voice and choice so that they can start to be impassioned. They can start to be a part of their learning so they can be a lifelong learner and not just a lifelong point getter. Because if we have point getters, they're getting A's, they're getting 4.0s, but they leave that castle to go get a job, they still don't have the skills that our employers want. So wherever they're at on that spectrum of like crushing school because they get how to play the game and get points, or they don't really fit into the game, that whole spectrum, everybody needs these ideal graduate skills, and we can work on that through the whole spectrum of learners. Now, here's a slide that I don't usually include, but it's STEM in general, so I wanted to go ahead and include it and give you this resource, and it's STEM curriculum. And I'm just not a curriculum guy. Like, I like to train people with the skills, adults, teachers, educators, with the skills to become curriculum creators themselves. I want your teachers to be able to have a mastery of their standards and understand them so well that they can create a STEM unit. That's my goal. That's the sweet spot, and we'll get into that. In the meantime, everybody says, well, what about STEM curriculum? Okay, well, here's a link. The Indiana Department of Education has created a list of STEM curriculum providers that have been vetted. So take a look at that. There's also a computer science piece on there. And those are folks that you can engage with. We don't have any affiliation with them, but I thought I'd give you a list. In this giant red hurt your eyes type of highlight, it says beware random acts of STEM. Like ordering a slingshot or a trebuchet or a parachute from a catalog does not mean you're doing STEM. If you just order a box, it doesn't mean you're doing STEM, even if it says STEM on there, right? If I get a box and then I follow these directions to make a thing, that doesn't mean that I've thought critically. It doesn't mean that I've solved problems. It means that I can follow directions. That's not on anybody's ideal graduate protocol, follow directions, right? Like that's at the low level. We want to be well above that where we can learn and problem solve, which means we need to find some problems that are difficult and have multiple steps. So tread lightly as you head in. Again, the providers on this list are good folks doing good work. You need to think about the big picture of like, how do they fit into your overall system and mindset, which is the next slide. STEM is a mindset. So when we walk into a STEM school, we should feel something different. We should see collaboration. We should see learners talking to learners, right? Our facilitators are running workshops, not just talking for 48 minutes, right? They're engaging learners in meaningful conversations, meaningful group work. They're reaching out to community partners. Like things look different because there's a mindset. It's not just a checklist. I've got one other resource to give you here, and this is linked in the presentation, so you can get to this too. The Indiana Department of Education actually has a STEM certification for schools. It's really high quality. They did a lot of work to get into it, and I really like it. So it's broken down into 4 domains. If you want to get super geeky, the 4 are here in more detail. These are what they call the essential elements. So if you're looking to launch a true STEM movement, these are things that you should be doing. You should have decision-making and planning and implementing the school STEM program as a school team, right? And that's one of our bullet points, is to create some kind of an admin teacher leadership team that is grassroots, boots on the ground, teachers moving this forward and not just a top-down initiative. where people check the box and say, we did STEM, we're good, because that doesn't move the needle. You need to do some interdisciplinary pieces. So they advocate for common work time. They look at equity within that. Are all learners having opportunity to get into STEM? Looking at the curriculum, the pieces that I really like and get geeked out about are those that start to create the mindset. So multi-day PD sessions for teachers to start to understand the process of changing the learning environment and changing to a more student-centered learning environment with coaching. Like research says that you need multiple hours, not just a 1 hour session. So you need a 3-day session with coaching in order to really move the needle for real on something and not just check the box. So I've got a link here because they advocate for work groups. Again, intentional work groups. How are you measuring that STEM is being integrated? So that's a resource you can take a look at and get as geeky into it as you'd like. Again, I think it's a really positive piece and I appreciate it, obviously. So I brought it into this presentation for you. So there are a couple of different ways to bring STEM specifically into your school as far as logistics. Teacher leadership groups is one that we absolutely love because we are boots on the ground, a grassroots organization. And we believe that if you get that teacher swell, then that administrator can lead that well. You can also bring in STEM coaches, but you've got to be careful that the STEM coach isn't the only person that cares about STEM, right? The STEM coach might help lead your initiative, but they're still leading teachers in professional development. They're leading in a way that empowers the teachers to find their voice in STEM. So you don't want to, can I also give you this as far as random acts of STEM? If you create a STEM class, that sounds like a great idea to get started, but STEM can get stuck in that class, right? So you want STEM to be throughout. You want problem solving to be in language arts and social studies as much as it is in science and math, right? And you can do those things without having to read every book on engineering, right? So, and I've actually got some resources in this presentation that will lay those out for you. My heart and soul is in project-based learning. So when you look at STEM in some form, I think you have to bring in project-based learning really as your instructional model. So if you look nationally, there's really no accepted STEM framework to work from on a daily basis for your teachers. Project-based learning is that framework to allow your teachers to work through a systematic process to give your learners some guardrails of where they go in this process. So teachers need this. Let me give you a quick overview. They also need this as you go through the change process. We're not throwing everything out to go to STEM and PBL. We're using what we have and repackaging a lot of things and giving them context to solve real world problems. And this graphic really helps explain that. So a traditional project, you would front load the learning to say, let's do a lecture, let's do an activity, let's do a quiz so I know that you learned everything. Let's do another lecture, another activity, another quiz on a different concept. We're going to review before the exam because I'm pretty sure you forgot the first concept and I want you to do well on the exam. So we review, take the exam, and now we can do the project. The problem here is that let's say this is a 4-week unit. The most engaging part is at the very end where you apply the knowledge you've learned and the project, right? So that's what we're most excited about. So you've had 4 weeks of pulling learners along to get to that project at the end. So in PBL, we flip that whole model on its end and we start with the project launch. We say, hey, 8th graders, there are parents that will find out today that their child has a genetic disease. And they want to know 2 things. They want to know, is my child okay? And they want to know everything there is about that disease. And the person launching this project is not the teacher. It's somebody from the Hemophilia Society. It's somebody from outside, somebody from industry, another scientist that comes in to launch this idea. And they say, hey, 8th graders, we want you to create pamphlets that will help educate these parents. And we want to put them in doctors' offices. We want you to make PowerPoints too and different PSAs to help educate parents. Would you guys like to do that? And they all say, yeah, we'd love to do that. We absolutely want to help. You'd be surprised. Even your most apathetic learner says, yeah, I want to do that. I said, okay, well, what do you need to know in order to do that? Gosh, a lot of stuff. I don't know much about genetic diseases. Okay, do you want your science teacher to teach you about those so that you can help people? Yeah, I suppose I do. I need to know probably some writing things. Okay, so technical writing, you want your English teacher to teach you that? Yeah. So what we just did is we just flipped. Did you hear that? Like the learners are now asking to be taught so they can solve this problem. That's the switch in the whole dynamic, the whole mindset piece that you have to get that you cannot get by ordering a set of trebuchets. So once you do that, you do this need to know session, and now you've laid out this project well where you're going to address your major power standards throughout this PBL unit. And now you can use the lecture or the workshop or the activity, the lab that's always worked and always engaged and is best practice. Now you can do those things. You're still going to give a traditional quiz right here to make sure that your learners are creating mastery. You might give a unit test. All those same best practices, but we've launched the PBL unit before they've done any of the learning. And sometimes that gets us a little scared. Like, why would we do that? They haven't learned anything yet. But that's the whole point, is we want them to be in a position where they're asking questions to learn things so they can solve a problem. Then we're going to ask them to present to a real live audience, might be doctors, scientists, and then we're actually going to put their pamphlets into a doctor's office and people are going to read them. Then we're going to reflect on that learning and see how we can do better next time. And that's that process that allows community partners to come into your classroom. It gets them buy-in and it allows your learners to interact with community partners. So maybe your learners have never been with a lawyer or a banker before, or an engineer or a scientist, because they're just not in their network. Now they have. They're like, wow, Susan's just a real person, just like me. Ryan used to sit in that exact seat over there. And then when that happens, again, there's another shift that happens. If Ryan was here and he can do that, well, maybe I can do that. And that's an important shift. That's the shift you're really looking for. So PBL is the vehicle, the instructional model, the structure to allow STEM to come into your school in a meaningful way, to change mindsets and directions. These are some of the things that we think are important within PBL. Community partnerships is a cornerstone because it allows us to get to the real world problems. We need to have these partnerships in order to dive into these real world problems and really elevate the reason for learning. We also want to give our learners a lot of voice and choice, and we can do a lot of different workshops on each one of these. In fact, we do that often in our PBL workshops, which is a great way to learn, to get your teachers on board. Is we want to have mastery of these concepts. And when we go into something unknown, we want to bring the things that are known and we want to create more of those known things, right? That's learning, connecting the unknown and the known. And when they leave, they've felt the PBL process. They've been through an entry event and workshops and need to knows, and your teachers actually present at the end of the third day, which, by the way, does get them nervous, which is good because that's what their learners feel. It also elevates their sense of learning. And that third day, we do this expo where we invite community partners in, just like you would in the classroom. So we mimic that PBL process for the adults. So if you want to see what that looks like, you can click on this link right here, the 3-day PBL Jumpstart. If that seems like a great idea, we can schedule a call. You'll schedule a call with me. And if you want to look at a Jumpstart, we can. Or if you just want to talk more about STEM, we can too. That'll take you to a Calendly link, and it'll set up a Zoom session automatically for us. These are some of the stats that Magnify Learning's been through. We've trained a lot of teachers in a lot of different areas, from urban to rural. So just a little bit of everybody. Here are some resources you can take right back to your teachers. Start with your teacher leadership group. Start your teacher leadership group with some folks that raise their hand and want to start out. So STEM and literacy, right? How do you get your English teachers on board? This is a podcast with a PBL English teacher who's doing STEM, and she walks you through that. Here's this What is PBL page. This is a game changer. It's literally, we created this for all of our partner schools who need to explain PBL to their community or the parents. So that's what it's made for. So there are easy to follow graphics. There are videos. There's a lot of different language you can point to, and you're more than welcome to use any of that. Just reference us, and we appreciate that. And your stakeholders will appreciate the clarity that comes with that. PBL or STEM and e-learning, here are some other resources that you can send to your teachers. They're going to want those. Free resources. We've got a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to, and you get a video every week. We've got the podcast. You can get that on whatever your podcast app is. And here's a link to free tools There's a ton of these. So Magnify Learning is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit organization. We're giving back to the field. There's a ton of resources there, from group contracts to rubrics to planning forms. They're all in there. Take a look, grab them. As you need help, reach out. STEM in high school. Here's a blog by Andy. He's a fantastic facilitator. He's taught traditionally and with PBL. He'd never turn back. Teaches AP Bio. So here's a blog from him to talk through that process. This is a middle school blog right here, I believe. And Trish will walk through what the math and science portion of STEM can look like as you put those together. If you grab my book, you can go on Amazon, get a copy of the book. You can get the audio version as well. And if you click on this link, you actually get a free course that goes along with it, where I walk you through each of the chapters. We've got schools that are using this as their book study. So as you read each chapter, there's a book study that you can do with it. It's linked in the course, and you can actually, it's a workbook, so you can work right through it, and you actually create your first PBL unit as you go through the study. And it's been a lot of fun creating that and seeing how people are using those. So you can jump into that. You just buy it, you click on that link, it'll show you everything you need to do. That's been this intro to how you bring STEM into your school. Make sure that you're touching base with your stakeholders, bring them on early so they can help in the process. Beware of random acts of STEM. You are looking for a transformation of your school, and it's totally possible. We've worked with the full innovation curve. We've seen those folks that run to it. We've seen those folks that are hesitant also say, hey, I can actually do this. Like, there's training and resources for this. I can do this, and it's good for kids. I'm in, right? I'm in. Your teachers want to teach this way. Your learners want to learn this way. Parents want your kids to have these pieces. So, and we see test scores go up all the time. So it hits all those different questions that you have or your board has. If I can help out in any way as you're planning some of these things, I'd be happy to. So my cell phone's on the screen. You've got my Twitter handle or email address. Just reach out. I love to talk about it. These are the things that get me really, really excited when we start talking about moving that culture and the instructional model to away from that traditional teacher-centered power to getting our learners empowered and getting them passionate and moving in their education. It's an exciting journey, and I think you'll love it.